The fading sun cast long shadows across Goldfield, Nevada. As Fiona Fletcher lowered her eyes in the face of her father's wrath, the forbidden book clutched tightly behind her skirts. At 21, she still lived under his oppressive rule, where the only knowledge a woman needed was how to cook, clean, and be a dutiful wife. "I've told you 100 times," Gerald Fletcher's voice boomed through their modest home. "No more raiding, no more of this foolishness. Your mother filled your head with nonsense before she passed, and look where it got her, wasting away with her nose in books instead of tending to what matters." Fiona bit her tongue, the familiar ache of loss mixing with frustration. Her mother had been the town schoolteacher until consumption took her 3 years ago. Since then, her father had forbidden Fiona from pursuing any further education, convinced that learning had somehow contributed to his wife's death. "A woman's place is in the home," he continued, snatching the astronomy book from behind her back. "Not with her head in the clouds. You'll never find a husband with these ideas." "Yes, father," she whispered, her dreams of understanding the stars above Goldfield's vast desert skies diminishing like twilight. Gerald tossed the book into the fireplace, and Fiona flinched as the pages curled and blackened. "That Carson boy is coming to dinner tomorrow. His father owns the largest silver mine in the county. You'll make yourself presentable." After he stormed out to the saloon where he spent most evenings, Fiona knelt by the fireplace, tears streaming down her face as she watched the constellations and planets burn to ash. The next morning, Fiona rose before dawn as usual to prepare breakfast. Her father stumbled in as she was setting the table, still reeking of whiskey from the night before. "There's a new hand at the Miller Ranch," Gerald grumbled, slumping into his chair. "Wants to buy one of our horses. Told him to come by this afternoon." Fiona nodded, placing a plate of eggs and bacon before him. The Fletcher property wasn't much, a small plot of land on Goldfield's outskirts with a few horses they bred and sold, but it kept them afloat, especially since her father gambled away most of their savings. After breakfast, she went about her chores, hanging laundry in the arid Nevada air, her mind wandering beyond the confines of their property. The vast landscape of sagebrush and mountains called to her, promising freedom she couldn't grasp. Just after noon, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Shielding her eyes from the relentless sun, Fiona watched as a rider came into view. He sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the cloudless sky. As he drew closer, Fiona smoothed her simple blue dress and tucked a loose strand of auburn hair behind her ear. The stranger tipped his hat, revealing a face bronzed by the sun, with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Miss Fletcher?" His voice was deep and warm like honey over rough stone. "Name's Bennett Edwards. I work for Mr. Miller. Your father mentioned you have a palomino for sale." "Yes, Mr. Edwards. Father's gone into town, but I can show you the horse if you'd like." Fiona led him toward the small corral behind their house, conscious of his presence behind her. "Please call me Ben," he said, falling into step beside her. "I've only been in Goldfield 3 weeks, came from Colorado looking for work." Something about his easy manner made Fiona feel comfortable. "What brought you to Nevada, Mr. Ben?" "The promise of open spaces," he replied, gazing at the distant mountains. "And perhaps something more, though I couldn't say what exactly." As they reached the corral, Fiona whistled softly and a beautiful golden horse trotted over. "This is Sunburst. He's 4 years old, well trained." Father raised him from a colt. Ben approached the horse, running his hand along its neck with practiced ease. "He's magnificent." While he examined the palomino, Fiona noticed a book peeking from his saddlebag. "You like to raid?" she asked before she could stop herself. Ben glanced at her, a curious expression crossing his face. I do. That one's about geology, trying to understand the land better. He patted Sunburst's flank. Do you read, Miss Fletcher? Fiona hesitated, then lowered her voice. When I can. My father doesn't approve. Before Ben could respond, they heard Gerald Fletcher's wagon approaching. That would be father, Fiona said quickly. I should go prepare some coffee. Ben nodded, but his gaze lingered on her face, as if seeing something there that interested him more than the horse. Gerald concluded the sale of Sunburst efficiently, eager to pocket the money. When Ben mentioned he'd be back in a week to collect the horse after preparing accommodations at the Miller Ranch, Gerald merely grunted his approval. As Ben mounted his own horse to leave, his eyes met Fiona's briefly. Miss Fletcher, it was a pleasure. Something passed between them, a silent understanding that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. That evening, Carson Miller arrived for dinner, his expensive suit out of place in their modest home. At 28, he was already balding and had small, calculating eyes that assessed Fiona like she was another silver vein to be mined. Your daughter has grown into quite the woman, Fletcher, Carson remarked, not bothering to address Fiona directly. My mother could use help managing the household staff, a good position for a future wife to learn. Fiona served the meal silently, her mind drifting to Ben Edwards and the Book of Geology. She wondered what other volumes he owned, what knowledge lay within their pages. Fiona. Her father's sharp voice pulled her back to reality. Mr. Miller asked if you enjoy music. Yes, she replied softly. Mother taught me to play the piano before she passed. Carson smiled thinly. My mother has a fine piano. Perhaps you could demonstrate your skills sometime. The dinner dragged on interminably, with Carson speaking exclusively to her father about business ventures and mining prospects. Not once did he ask Fiona about her thoughts or interests. After he finally departed with a promise to call again, Gerald looked at his daughter with satisfaction. He'll make you a good husband, wealthy, established. You'll want for nothing. Except a voice, Fiona murmured, too quietly for him to hear. The week passed slowly. Fiona tended to Sunburst, knowing she would miss the gentle horse who had been her confidant on many lonely days. On the afternoon Ben was due to collect him, her father was once again in town, leaving her to handle the transaction alone. Ben arrived precisely when expected, riding up to the corral with a friendly wave. Afternoon, Miss Fletcher. How's Sunburst today? Ready for his new home, I think, she replied, leading the Palomino out. He likes apples if you have them at the Miller Ranch. I'll make sure he gets plenty. Ben dismounted, then hesitated. I brought something. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a book. It's about the stars. I thought you might enjoy it, given what you said about reading. Fiona stared at the leather-bound volume, her heart racing. I couldn't possibly. Father would keep it hidden, Ben suggested quietly. Knowledge shouldn't be denied to anyone, least of all someone with curious eyes like yours. Tentatively, she took the book, running her fingers over the embossed title, The Celestial Atlas. Why would you do this for me? Ben's expression was earnest. I was a teacher back in Colorado before circumstances brought me west. Old habits, I suppose. A teacher. Fiona's eyes widened. But you work as a ranch hand now. Life takes unexpected turns. He smiled ruefully. I needed a fresh start, but I still believe in the power of learning. Fiona clutched the book to her chest. Thank you. I'll treasure it. As Ben prepared to lead Sunburst away, he paused. If you ever want to discuss what you read, I'm usually free in the evenings. There's that old cottonwood by the creek on the boundary between your land and the Millers. No one would notice us there. The offer hung in the air between them, dangerous and tempting. I couldn't possibly, she began. Just an offer, he said easily. No pressure, but the invitation stands." With that, he tipped his hat and led Sunburst away, leaving Fiona holding the forbidden book and a decision that could change everything. That night, after her father fell into his usual whiskey-induced slumber, Fiona lit a small candle and opened Ben's book beneath her blankets. The illustrations of constellations and planets transported her to worlds beyond Goldfield's dusty streets. She read until her eyes burned, absorbing information her father would have thrown into the fire. 3 days later, Carson Miller called again, bringing a garish brooch as a gift. "Gold and rubies," he boasted, "from my own mine." Fiona thanked him politely, though the piece was ostentatious and not to her taste. Throughout his visit, he spoke of his business success and the grand house he planned to build, never once asking about her hopes or dreams. After he left, her father announced, "He'll propose within the month. You'll accept, of course." The thought of being Carson's wife, a decorative possession in his collection, made Fiona's stomach turn. That evening, she made her decision. As twilight descended, she slipped out of the house while her father dozed in his chair. With Ben's astronomy book tucked securely in her apron pocket, she made her way to the old cottonwood by the creek, her heart pounding with each step. The tree stood like a sentinel against the darkening sky, its branches reaching toward the first emerging stars. And beneath it, sitting on a fallen log, was Ben. He stood when he saw her approach, surprise and pleasure illuminating his features. "Miss Fletcher, I wasn't sure you'd come." "Fiona, please," she said breathlessly. "And I wasn't sure either until this moment." Ben gestured to the log beside him. "Have you been reading the Atlas?" She nodded eagerly, pulling the book from her pocket. "I've read it cover to cover, twice." She opened to a page showing the summer constellations. "Can you really see all of these from Earth?" "We can," Ben replied, looking up at the rapidly darkening sky. "In fact, we can see some right now. Look there," he pointed upward. "That's the Big Dipper, part of Ursa Major, the Great Bear." Fiona followed his gaze, her breath catching as she identified the constellation from the book's illustrations. "It's magnificent. And over there, that's Cassiopeia, the Queen." Ben moved closer, his arm extending alongside hers to direct her gaze. "See how it forms a W?" For an hour, they sat beneath the tree, Ben pointing out constellations and Fiona drinking in knowledge like a parched desert traveler finding water. When the chill of the Nevada night began to settle around them, Ben hesitantly asked, "Will you come again tomorrow?" "I have a book on botany I could bring. The desert has fascinating plant life." Fiona knew she should refuse. Meeting a man secretly was dangerous for her reputation and her safety if her father discovered her disobedience. But the prospect of learning, of escaping the suffocating confines of her prescribed life, was irresistible. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll come." And so began their clandestine lessons beneath the cottonwood tree. Each evening, Fiona would slip away while her father drank himself into oblivion, and Ben would be waiting with a new book or subject to explore. Botany gave way to history, then basic mathematics and even poetry. One evening, 2 weeks into their secret meetings, Ben brought a slate and chalk. "I thought we might try something different," he explained. "Writing can be as liberating as reading." Fiona hesitated. "I can write my letters, of course, but not much more." "That's a fine start." Ben handed her the slate. "Tell me, if you could write anything, a letter, a story, anything at all, what would it be?" She considered the question, chalk poised above the slate. "I think I'd write about freedom, about skies so vast they make you dizzy and knowledge so boundless it can never be contained." Ben's expression softened. "Then write that." Under his gentle guidance, Fiona began to form sentences, expressing thoughts she'd never dared voice aloud. Ben corrected her spelling and grammar with respect, never making her feel small for her mistakes. "You're a natural writer," he told her when she finished, her slate filled with passionate, if imperfect, prose about yearning for independence. "My mother would have been pleased," Fiona said quietly. "She always said education was the key to a woman's freedom." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman." "She was." Fiona traced a pattern in the dirt with her toe. "Father wasn't always as he is now. After Mother died, something broke in him. He blames her love of learning for taking her away from us, as if reading somehow caused the consumption that killed her." Ben was silent for a moment. Grief makes people irrational sometimes. It's easier to blame something than accept that some things are beyond our control. "Perhaps," Fiona agreed, "but it doesn't give him the right to lock away my mind." "No," Ben said firmly, "it doesn't." As the weeks passed, their lessons became the center of Fiona's existence. She learned to solve equations, to understand the principles of democracy, to recite Shakespeare. But more than academic knowledge, she gained confidence in her own abilities and thoughts. Meanwhile, Carson Miller's courtship proceeded with her father's enthusiastic blessing. He visited twice weekly, bringing expensive gifts and talking endlessly about himself. Fiona endured his company, her mind often wandering to the cottonwood tree and the next lesson with Ben. One evening in late August, as summer's heat began to soften toward autumn, Ben brought a different kind of book, a novel. "Pride and Prejudice" by Jane Austen. Fiona read the title aloud. "Is this about history?" Ben smiled. "It's fiction, a story about a young woman who refuses to marry without both love and respect." Fiona ran her fingers over the cover. "That sounds revolutionary." "Some might say so. I thought you might enjoy reading about a heroine who values her own mind and heart." They sat closer than usual that night, shoulders almost touching as they took turns reading passages aloud. When they reached Elizabeth Bennet's rejection of Mr. Collins, Fiona's voice faltered. "What's wrong?" Ben asked. "She refused him, even knowing it would disappoint her family and potentially leave her destitute." Fiona closed the book, her fingers trembling slightly. "I wish I had her courage." "You do," Ben said softly. "You're here, aren't you, learning despite your father's prohibitions." "That's different from defying him openly." She looked up at the stars, now familiar friends thanks to Ben's teachings. "Carson will propose soon. Father expects me to accept. And will you?" Ben's voice was carefully neutral, but Fiona detected something beneath the surface, concern, perhaps, or something more personal. "I don't know," she admitted. "What choice do I have? I have no money, no profession, nowhere to go." Ben was quiet for so long that Fiona thought he might not respond. Finally, he said, "You always have choices, Fiona. They may be difficult, the consequences may be severe, but they exist." Their eyes met in the moonlight, and something shifted between them. Ben's hand moved tentatively toward hers, his fingers brushing against her palm. "I should probably return home," Fiona whispered, though she made no move to leave. "Probably," Ben agreed, his hand now covering hers completely. For a breathless moment they remained still, the contact between them electric and forbidden. Then slowly, Ben leaned forward, his intention clear in his eyes. Fiona knew she should pull away. A kiss would transform their relationship from teacher and student to something far more dangerous. But as his lips gently met hers, she found herself responding, her free hand moving to his shoulder. The kiss was brief but profound, a crossing of boundaries that could never be uncrossed. When they parted, Ben's expression was a mixture of wonder and concern. "I shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "No," Fiona agreed, "but I'm glad you did." The ride back to the Miller ranch that night was longer than usual for Ben, his mind replaying the kiss over and over. He'd come to Goldfield to escape his past, not to complicate his future by falling in love with a woman promised to another man. Yet from the first moment, he'd seen Fiona bright-eyed and curious. Despite her circumstances, something had drawn him to her like a moth to flame. The following evening, when Fiona arrived at the cottonwood, Ben was already pacing nervously. He stopped when he saw her, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something," he began. "About why I left Colorado." Fiona sat on their usual log, hands folded in her lap. "I'm listening." Ben took a deep breath. "I was engaged to the daughter of the school board president. It was arranged more for convenience and social standing than love, though I respected her. A week before the wedding, I discovered she'd been embezzling from the school funds I was responsible for overseeing." Fiona's eyes widened. "What did you do?" I confronted her. She denied everything, then threatened to accuse me of the theft if I exposed her. He ran a hand through his hair. "I had evidence, but her father's influence was considerable. In the end, I resigned my position to avoid scandal, broke the engagement, and headed west before any charges could be fabricated against me." "That's terrible," Fiona said. "You lost your career because of her actions." Ben nodded grimly. "I lost more than that. My reputation in that town was ruined by rumors she spread afterward. That's why I'm working as a ranch hand now, starting over where no one knows me." "Thank you for telling me," Fiona said softly. "But why now?" "Because last night changed things." He sat beside her, not quite touching. "I care for you, Fiona, more than I should given our circumstances, and before anything else happens between us, you deserve to know the truth about my past." Fiona considered his words. "You did nothing wrong. You were protecting yourself from someone who betrayed you. Some would say I took the coward's way out by leaving. I think it was brave to walk away from a life you'd built rather than compromise your principles." She hesitated, then reached for his hand. "Thank you for your honesty." Ben's fingers tightened around hers. "There's something else. Miller mentioned yesterday that Carson intends to propose to you this Sunday after church." The news, though expected, hit Fiona like a physical blow. "So soon?" "He's ordered a ring from San Francisco. It arrives on Saturday's stage." Ben's expression was pained. "Fiona, I have no right to ask this, but what will you say?" She stared at their joined hands. "I don't know. Father would never forgive me if I refused. We'd lose everything. He's mortgaged our property to cover his gambling debts, and Carson has been buying up the notes." "You could leave Goldfield," Ben suggested cautiously. "Start fresh somewhere else like I did." "And go where? Do what? I have no skills that would earn a living." The frustration of her situation overwhelmed her. This is why Father's restrictions are so effective. He's made sure I have no options. Ben was silent for a moment. "What if you did have options? What if you could learn a trade in a few days?" "Impossible. Not in days, no, but in months, perhaps." He turned to face her fully. "Listen, I've been offered a position teaching at a new school in Sacramento. The pay isn't much, but it's a start. I was planning to turn it down because," he hesitated, "because leaving Goldfield would mean leaving you." Fiona's heart raced. "Sacramento, that's so far." "It is," he acknowledged. "But it's also a growing city with opportunities for someone willing to learn. The school needs an assistant, someone to help with the younger children. It wouldn't pay much either, but combined with my salary, we could manage a modest living." The implication of his words hung in the air between them. "Are you suggesting we leave together?" Fiona asked, scarcely believing what she was hearing. "I'm suggesting I care for you too much to watch you marry a man who sees you as property." Ben's eyes held hers intently. "I'm suggesting that what's growing between us deserves a chance. And yes, I'm suggesting we could build a life together in Sacramento, if that's what you want." Fiona's mind whirled with possibilities and fears. My father would come after us. Carson would too. They might try, Ben conceded. But California is a long way from Nevada and neither has legal claim on you. You're 21, Fiona. By law, you can make your own choices. It would mean abandoning everything I've ever known. Yes, I won't pretend it would be easy. He squeezed her hand. Think about it. You don't need to decide tonight, but Carson will expect an answer on Sunday one way or another. The gravity of the decision before her was overwhelming. I need time, she whispered. Of course. Ben released her hand reluctantly. I'll be here tomorrow night and the night after. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it. They parted with the weight of unspoken words between them. As Fiona crept back into her silent house, she felt as though she stood at a crossroads, each path leading to an entirely different life. The next day dragged endlessly. Carson visited briefly, making pointed references to a special question he would ask after Sunday service. Her father beamed with satisfaction, already counting the financial advantages of the match. That night, when Fiona met Ben beneath the cottonwood, their lesson was subdued. He brought a book of American poetry, and they read quietly together, both aware of the decision looming over them. As they finished a Walt Whitman poem about the open road, Ben closed the book and turned to her. Have you thought about what we discussed? Fiona nodded slowly. I've thought of little else. She took a deep breath. I'm afraid, Ben, not just of my father's anger or what people would say. I'm afraid of failing in a new place, of not being capable enough. That's understandable, he said gently. But Fiona, in the weeks we've been meeting, I've watched you absorb knowledge like a sponge. You have a natural intelligence that formal education would only enhance. You could succeed at anything you set your mind to. You really believe that, I know it. His conviction was evident in every word. And I believe in us too. What's growing between us is worth fighting for. Fiona looked up at the vast Nevada sky, the constellations now as familiar as old friends. My mother used to say that true freedom comes from within, that once you claim your right to think and choose, no one can truly cage you again. Your mother was a wise woman, Ben said softly. Yes, she was. Fiona turned back to him, decision crystallizing within her. I'll go with you to Sacramento. I choose freedom and I choose you. The joy that illuminated Ben's face was answer enough, but he pulled her gently into his arms, sealing their decision with a kiss that promised a future neither had dared imagine before. They made their plans carefully. The Sacramento position required Ben's response by the end of the month. They would leave Saturday night, while her father was at his weekly poker game, taking only what they could carry. Ben had savings enough for train tickets and initial lodgings. They would be married as soon as they reached California. Friday night was their last meeting beneath the cottonwood. Ben brought no books this time, only a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. A graduation gift, he said with a smile, for my most dedicated student. Inside was a journal bound in soft leather with Fiona's initials embossed on the cover. For you to write your own story, Ben explained, starting with our journey. Fiona traced the letters with her fingertips. It's perfect, thank you. Tomorrow night, I'll wait for you here with the horses at 8 o'clock. Ben took both her hands in his. Are you absolutely certain about this, Fiona? Once we leave, there's no turning back. She nodded firmly. I've never been more certain of anything. Their parting was bittersweet, filled with anticipation of tomorrow's adventure and the knowledge that they were leaving their secret sanctuary behind forever. Saturday dawned bright and clear. Fiona moved through her chores mechanically, her mind focused on the night ahead. She packed a small bundle, discreetly a change of clothes, her mother's locket, Ben's books, and the new journal. Everything else would stay behind. As evening approached, her father prepared for his poker game, instructing Fiona to receive Carson properly when he called the next day with his important question. "This is the opportunity we've been waiting for," Gerald said, straightening his vest. "Don't disappoint me, girl." "No, father," she replied, the words hollow in her mouth. After he left, Fiona moved around the house one last time, touching familiar objects, saying silent goodbyes. She wrote a brief note explaining her departure, not revealing her destination but assuring her father she was safe and had chosen her own path. It wasn't much, but it was all the closure she could offer. At 7:45, she slipped out the back door, her small bundle clutched to her chest. The night was cool, stars emerging in the deepening twilight as she made her way toward the cottonwood. Ben was already there, 2 horses saddled and ready. His face broke into a relieved smile when he saw her approaching. "You came," he said simply. "Did you doubt I would?" "Not for a moment." He helped her secure her bundle to the saddle. "We'll ride to Silver Springs tonight. The train passes through at 5 tomorrow morning." Fiona mounted the horse, a gentle mare Ben had borrowed from the Miller ranch. As she settled into the saddle, a strange mixture of exhilaration and sadness washed over her. "I've never left Goldfield before." "There's a whole world waiting for you," Ben promised. "We'll explore it together." They were about to depart when the sound of approaching hoofbeats froze them in place. From the darkness emerged 2 riders, Carson Miller and, to Fiona's horror, her father. Gerald Fletcher's face was contorted with rage as he recognized his daughter and the ranch hand. "Get down from that horse, girl. Now." Carson's expression was equally thunderous. "Edwards, I should have known you were behind this, stealing my fiancé and my horses in one night." Ben positioned his horse protectively between Fiona and the men. "Miss Fletcher isn't your fiancé, Miller. And she's leaving of her own free will." "Is that true, Fiona?" her father demanded. "Have you lost your mind, running off with a penniless ranch hand?" Fiona straightened in the saddle, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. "Mr. Edwards was a teacher in Colorado, father. He's been teaching me in the evenings history, science, mathematics, all the things you forbade me to learn." Gerald's face paled with shock. "You've been meeting this man in secret, disgracing yourself and this family." "The only disgrace," Fiona said clearly, "is denying your daughter the right to knowledge and choice. Mother would be ashamed of what you've become." Her father recoiled as if struck. Carson, however, was less affected by her words. He urged his horse forward menacingly. "I don't care if he's taught you to recite the Constitution backwards, your promise to me, and I always collect what I'm owed." "She's not a debt to be collected, Miller," Ben said evenly, though Fiona could see the tension in his shoulders. "She's a human being with her own mind and heart." Carson sneered. Pretty words from a man stealing another's property. Something dangerous flashed in Ben's eyes. "Say that again and you'll regret it." Sensing the escalating threat, Fiona moved her horse forward. "Please, let's not resort to violence. Carson, I never agreed to marry you. The arrangement was between you and my father without my consent." "You ungrateful child," Gerald exploded. "After everything I've done for you, Carson is offering you security, respectability." "But not love," Fiona countered. "Not respect for my mind or spirit." "I'll find my own way, father, with a man who values me for more than my domestic skills." Carson's face darkened with fury. "You think you can humiliate me like this? I own half the mortgages in Goldfield, including your father's. One word from me and you'll both be ruined." "Then ruin us," Fiona said with surprising calm. "Material things can be rebuilt. A life without freedom is no life at all." Gerald stared at his daughter as if seeing her for the first time. Something shifted in his expression, not acceptance, exactly, but perhaps recognition of the woman she had become. "You sound just like your mother," he said quietly. "Thank you," Fiona replied, feeling tears threaten. "That's the highest compliment you could give me." Carson, however, wasn't finished. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a revolver, pointing it at Ben. "Get down from that horse, Edwards. You're not taking her anywhere." Time seemed to slow. Fiona saw Ben tense, calculating his options. Her father's eyes widened with alarm at this unexpected escalation. "Carson, don't be a fool," Gerald warned. "Put that away before someone gets hurt." "Stay out of this, Fletcher," Carson snarled. "This thief needs to learn his place." Ben remained steady, his voice controlled. "Think carefully, Miller. Is this really how you want to resolve this? With violence in front of witnesses?" "You've stolen what's mine," Carson insisted, the gun wavering slightly in his hand. "I belong to myself," Fiona interjected firmly, "and I choose to leave with Ben." The standoff stretched for several agonizing moments. Then, unexpectedly, Gerald Fletcher moved his horse between Carson's gun and the young couple. "Enough," he said wearily. "Let them go, Miller." Carson gaped at him incredulously. "Have you lost your mind too? She's your daughter." "Yes, she is." Gerald looked at Fiona with complex emotions crossing his weathered face. "And she's her mother's daughter too, stubborn, intelligent, determined. I've tried to cage that spirit for 3 years, and all I've done is push her away." Fiona stared at her father in disbelief. "Father?" Gerald didn't quite meet her eyes. "Your mother never wanted the life I forced on you after she died. She wanted you to continue your education, maybe even teach like she did. I was afraid of losing you to the wider world, just as I lost her." The admission, so unexpected and raw, brought tears to Fiona's eyes. "I'm not mother, and learning didn't kill her, father. Sickness did. I know that now." He turned to face Carson. "Lower that gun, Miller. My daughter is not property to be bought or stolen." Carson's hand trembled with rage. "You'll regret this, Fletcher. Both of you will." "Perhaps," Gerald acknowledged, "but not as much as I'd regret forcing her into a loveless marriage." He looked back at Fiona. "Is this truly what you want, daughter, to leave Goldfield with this man?" Fiona nodded, her voice steady despite her tears. "It is, father. I want to learn, to grow, to build a life based on mutual respect and love." Gerald sighed heavily, the fight draining out of him. "Then go. But know this, my door remains open should you ever wish to return." Carson made a sound of disgust and abruptly lowered his weapon. "You're both fools. The girl will come crawling back when she discovers how harsh the world is beyond Goldfield." "Perhaps," Ben said, speaking for the first time since the confrontation began. "But she'll face that harshness as a free woman making her own choices." He looked at Gerald with newfound respect. "Thank you, sir." Gerald nodded stiffly. "Take care of my daughter, Edwards. She's all I have left in this world." "I will, sir. You have my word." With final glances at her father, part gratitude, part farewell, Fiona and Ben urged their horses forward, leaving Carson seething and Gerald watching silently as they disappeared into the Nevada night. They rode hard until they reached Silver Springs shortly after midnight, both too overwhelmed by their narrow escape to speak much along the way. At the small hotel near the train station, Ben secured a room for Fiona and another for himself, maintaining propriety despite their circumstances. Before they parted for what remained of the night, Fiona touched Ben's arm gently. "Thank you for not fighting Carson. It would have ended badly." "Violence is rarely the answer," Ben replied, "though I confess I was tempted when he called you his property." He smiled softly. "Your father surprised me." "He surprised me too," Fiona admitted. "Perhaps there's hope for him yet." "There's always hope for those willing to see truth, even when it's painful." Ben hesitated, then leaned forward to place a gentle kiss on her forehead. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we begin our new life. The train journey to Sacramento took 2 days, carrying them across desert landscapes into the greener valleys of California. Fiona spent hours with her face pressed to the window, absorbing every new vista with wonder. Ben sat beside her, answering her countless questions about the passing terrain, the distant mountains, the changing vegetation. It's like the geography books coming to life, she marveled as they passed through the Sierra Nevada range. This is just the beginning, Ben promised. There's so much more to see and learn. They arrived in Sacramento on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. The city bustled with commerce and activity, overwhelming after the relative quiet of Goldfield. Ben led Fiona through the streets to a modest boarding house where he'd arranged accommodations through correspondence with the school board. Mrs. Sullivan, the proprietress, was a kindly widow who clucked sympathetically when Ben explained they were newly arrived from Nevada and planned to marry as soon as possible. The young lady can stay in the East Room, she declared. And you, Mr. Edwards, in the attic room until the wedding. I run a respectable house. Of course, Mrs. Sullivan, Ben agreed readily. We wouldn't have it any other way. The following day, they obtained a marriage license and were wed by a justice of the peace, with Mrs. Sullivan and her sister serving as witnesses. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with promises of love, respect, and partnership exchanged along with simple gold bands Ben had purchased with his savings. Mrs. Edwards, Ben murmured afterward, the name new and wonderful on his lips. Fiona smiled, her heart full. It sounds right, doesn't it? They moved into a small apartment near the school where Ben would teach, furnishing it simply with second-hand pieces that nevertheless felt like treasures to Fiona. Each item they selected together was a symbol of their shared future. The school term began in October. Ben's position as teacher of the upper grades came with modest but steady pay, and to his delight, the school board was receptive to his suggestion that Fiona assist with the younger children. She has a natural gift with children, he told the board members, and a keen mind for learning herself. After a brief interview and demonstration lesson, Fiona was hired as an assistant teacher, with the understanding that she would continue her own education under Ben's guidance to eventually qualify for a full teaching position. I can't believe it, she whispered to Ben after receiving the news. They're paying me to learn while I teach. They recognized your value, Ben replied proudly, just as I did. Their first months in Sacramento passed in a blur of adjustments and discoveries. Fiona thrived in the schoolroom, her natural empathy and enthusiasm making her a favorite with the youngest pupils. In the evenings, she and Ben would sit at their small kitchen table, lamp burning low as he guided her through more advanced studies. You're a better student than any I had in Colorado, he told her one night as they reviewed a particularly complex mathematics problem she had mastered. I have a better teacher, she countered, leaning over to kiss him. Their life together was not without challenges. Money was often tight, and the small apartment sometimes felt cramped after the open spaces of Nevada. Occasionally, Fiona would feel pangs of homesickness, wondering about her father alone in Goldfield. 3 months after their arrival in Sacramento, she finally wrote to him, a careful letter describing their new life and expressing hope for reconciliation. Weeks passed with no response, and Fiona tried to hide her disappointment. Give him time, Ben advised gently. Change doesn't come easily to a man like your father. As winter yielded to spring, Fiona discovered she was expecting their first child. The news brought both joy and practical concerns about their future. I'll need to stop teaching eventually, she worried one evening, hands resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "We'll lose my income." "Only temporarily," Ben assured her, his eyes alight with excitement about the baby. "The school board chairman's wife has already hinted they would hold your position, and I've been offered additional work tutoring in the evenings." "You already work so hard," Fiona protested. Ben took her hands in his. "This is what partnership means, love. We adjust together, support each other through changes. Your father taught you that a woman's value lies in service to others. I believe our value, men and women alike, lies in how we grow together, lifting each other toward our best selves." Fiona's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "How did I get so fortunate to find you under that cottonwood tree?" "I ask myself the same question every day," Ben replied, drawing her close. In June, nearly a year after they had left Goldfield, an unexpected letter arrived from Nevada. Fiona recognized her father's handwriting immediately and opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a brief note, stilted but sincere, expressing hope for her happiness and sharing news that Carson Miller had left town after his mining investments failed. The most surprising enclosure, however, was a bank draft for a considerable sum. "Your mother set this aside for your education," Gerald wrote. "I was wrong to withhold it. It's yours by right." "He kept this all this time," Fiona whispered, showing the draft to Ben. "Perhaps he needed time to honor your mother's wishes," Ben suggested, "and to accept your choices." The unexpected funds allowed them to purchase a small house on the outskirts of Sacramento, with a garden for Fiona and space for their growing family. In September, just as the new school term began, their son was born healthy and strong, with his mother's curious eyes and his father's determined chin. They named him Gerald Benjamin Edwards, honoring both their pasts while embracing their future. 2 months later, they received another surprise, a visit from Fiona's father. He arrived unannounced, standing awkwardly on their porch with a carved wooden cradle as a gift for the grandson he hadn't yet met. The reunion was initially tense, years of hurt and misunderstanding creating a barrier not easily dismantled. But as Gerald held his grandson for the first time, something softened in his weathered face. "He looks like your mother around the eyes," he said gruffly. "That's what Ben says too," Fiona replied, watching her father carefully. "Would you like to stay for dinner? We have much to talk about." Gerald nodded, his expression a mixture of regret and hope. "I sold the property in Goldfield," he admitted as they sat in the small parlor. "Too many memories there and not all of them good. I've taken a position managing a livery stable in Reno." "That's good, father," Fiona said sincerely. "A fresh start, like you found here." He glanced around the modest but comfortable home. "You've done well for yourselves." "We have," Ben agreed, joining the conversation. "Fiona will return to teaching after the new year. The school board values her work greatly." Gerald's eyes widened slightly. "Teaching, like your mother?" "Yes," Fiona confirmed, "and continuing my own education as well. Ben believes I could eventually attend the normal school for formal teacher training." A complicated expression crossed her father's face: regret, pride, and something like acceptance. "Your mother would be proud," he said finally. "She always said you had a teaching spirit." "I'd like to think so," Fiona replied softly. That evening, as they shared a simple meal, bridges began to rebuild between father and daughter. Not all wounds were healed. Some would take years of careful tending, but a foundation was laid for a new kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than authority and obedience. Before retiring to the small guest room they had prepared for him, Gerald approached Ben privately. "I misjudged you, Edwards, and I nearly cost my daughter her happiness because of it. We all make mistakes, sir," Ben replied evenly. "The measure of a man is how he rectifies them." Gerald nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. "You're good for her, better than I understood." "We're good for each other," Ben corrected. "Your daughter has taught me as much as I've taught her." 2 years later, with Gerald now a regular visitor to their Sacramento home, Fiona achieved her goal of entering the normal school for formal teacher training. On her first day of classes, Ben presented her with a new journal, similar to the one he had given her before their departure from Goldfield. "For the next chapter of your education," he explained with a proud smile. Fiona, now confident in her abilities and secure in her choices, accepted it with a kiss. "Our education," she corrected. "We never stop learning together." Their second child, a daughter they named Elizabeth, after the heroine in the first novel they had shared, arrived the following year, completing their family. As the children grew, both Ben and Fiona ensured they understood the value of knowledge and the importance of questioning the world around them. "My father tried to keep me from learning because he feared it would take me away from him," Fiona explained to young Gerald when he asked why his grandfather sometimes grew quiet during discussions of education. "But the truth is, learning brought me closer to myself and to the people who truly value me." By the time Fiona completed her formal education and became a full-fledged teacher alongside Ben, her father had moved to Sacramento, taking a position at a local stable and becoming a regular presence in his grandchildren's lives. The bitterness that had once consumed him gradually faded, replaced by an acceptance of change and growth that would have seemed impossible in those dark days after his wife's death. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home watching their children play in the twilight, Ben reached for Fiona's hand. "Do you ever regret it? Leaving Goldfield that night?" Fiona shook her head without hesitation. "Not for a moment. You gave me the greatest gift possible, the freedom to discover who I truly am." "You gave that to yourself," Ben corrected gently. "I just provided some books and encouragement along the way." Fiona smiled, thinking of the lonely girl beneath the cottonwood tree who had dared to imagine a different life. "Perhaps we gave it to each other." As the stars emerged above Sacramento, the same stars they had studied together beneath that Nevada tree, Fiona felt the fullness of a life chosen rather than prescribed. Her father had forbidden her to learn, fearing knowledge would lead her away from the life he envisioned. Instead, it had led her exactly where she needed to be, to a life of purpose, passion, and love with a man who saw her mind as her greatest asset rather than a threat. "Look, Mama," little Elizabeth called, pointing upward. "The Great Bear Papa showed me in the sky book." Fiona exchanged a glance with Ben, both remembering their first astronomy lesson. "Yes, darling," she called back, "and there's so much more to see if you keep looking up."